This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Well, she is the type of child that would give you the shirt off her back. She never wanted anybody mad at her for anything. She wanted everybody to be her friend. She wanted everybody to be happy. After 20 years, I still believe my daughter is alive. I do not believe she's dead. And I know somebody knows something. I'm not crazy enough to think that a 9-year-old can disappear into thin air without somebody knowing something.
It was 20 years ago on Valentine's Day. Aisha Degree disappeared in the middle of the night. The fourth grader is believed to have left home in the hours just before dawn, walking out of her Fallston neighborhood near Shelby, North Carolina. Witnesses saw her walking along Highway 18 within a few miles of her home. A tipster reported she possibly got into a car. More than a year later, Aisha's backpack turned up at a construction site 30 miles away. It raised new questions, but yielded few clues about the missing girl's whereabouts.
A search was done in that area. Same type of situation. People were interviewed, evidence was collected and sent off, and until this day, Aisha's still not been located.
So this is near the area where she was last seen.
Detective Tim Adams came out of retirement in 2014 to work the case for the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. He's on a team that includes the FBI's Charlotte Field Office and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. These agencies have been on the case since Aisha disappeared, but have recently redoubled their efforts. This new team, which first met in 2015, now meets regularly to sift through clues and evaluate new information and results from interviews. The case still generates hundreds of leads, including 45 in just the past year. The FBI is offering a $25,000 reward in the case on top of a $20,000 reward posted by the Sheriff's Office and the community. Billboards are posted along local roads where Aisha may have been before she disappeared. And the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children recently released an updated age progression photograph showing what Aisha might look like today as a 29-year-old woman. The national nonprofit produced another age-progressed image of Aisha 5 years ago.
What we're trying to do is provide hope-based images, tools to help families that have these long-term missing children in the hope that we can create an image that might have a child brought home.
The FBI asked for the new image and is updating the roadside billboard and its posters seeking information. Over the years, investigators have released a few potential clues in the case. In 2016, they published images of a car that may have picked up Aisha. They believe it was a 1970s model Lincoln Continental Mark IV or a Ford Thunderbird with rust around the wheel wells. In 2018, investigators revealed 2 items found in Aisha's book bag: a Dr. Seuss children's book from her school library, McElligot's Pool, and a New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt, which didn't belong to Aisha. Investigators are hoping anyone with information will come forward.
We will continue to pursue all avenues to further finding out what circumstances led to her disappearance.
Aisha's mysterious disappearance and the enduring questions surrounding it have shaken her hometown, a close-knit hamlet in the Carolina foothills.
This house here on the left, the end apartment, was Aisha's apartment. Her family, somebody's moved in it now. They no longer live there.
People still want to help. People still want to find her. And she has been called Shelby's sweetheart. And just because she's a child that one of our own that's gone missing, and we want to find out what happened to her.
For Aisha's family, prayers and hope have sustained them for the past 20 years, but they need answers. Hoping this anniversary will be different, Aquila appealed directly to anyone who may have been involved in her daughter's fate to come forward and unburden themselves.
That's my prayer every night, that God will get into their heart and let them just come forward, or somebody that know them come forward, because it's got to be a weight on them. We're hoping and we're praying that she's had a halfway decent life anyway, even though we didn't get to raise her. She was 9 years old, and now she'll be 30 this year. So we missed everything. But I don't care. If she walked in the door right now, I wouldn't care what I miss. All I want to do is see her.
Okay, so, I don't feel like Israel Keys is a pedophile in that, he's looking for children. I feel like it's a sliding scale, and I feel like he doesn't realize, even when he's saying it, and they don't really, say anything as far as, oh, well, what about Samantha Koenig? I mean, she was 18, but she was in school. To me, she was a child. To, I think, everybody looking for her, she was a child. So I think that there was sort of a perception thing there, and I don't think that he ever specifically targeted like really young children. They just wouldn't interest him. And then in the event, now I do think that his victims were probably younger and more like kids than his statement implies.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so even at the very widest interpretation of that, I don't feel like he's being completely truthful there. But I think in his mind, he justifies it. And I don't feel like he's lying straight up. And I feel like that as he got older, like what he considered a child would have gotten older. Perhaps as his child grew, it was like younger than her. I'm not really sure what the perception there was, but
I think you're right. It has to do with his child at that moment, his description.
Right. And so because he wouldn't hurt his child, he wouldn't do that. And I think there's a lot to be sort of ripped apart as far as the kid thing goes. But my stance on that is that he says, I don't do things to kids. And I think he didn't think of Samantha Koenig as a kid, but she very well was. She was a kid, no question. Kind of that leaves that wide open for interpretation.
This is episode 10. This week, we continue our look at 1999, 2000, and 2001, and the killer's time in the Army. We looked at two cases, one in Washington and one in Colorado, that are still from 1999 and are worth a quick mention. Sarah Ariel Skiba was visiting her father, Paul Skiba, during the weekend of February 7th, 1999, at his home in Thornton, Colorado. Paul and Sarah's mother, Michelle Russell, are divorced, and it was Paul's scheduled visitation with his daughter at that time. Sarah resided in Granby, Colorado, with her mother in 1999. Paul owned Tough Movers, a moving company based in Westminster, Colorado. He and Sarah were last seen at approximately 6 o'clock p.m. on February 7th, 1999, in Morrison, Colorado. Sarah accompanied Paul and his employee, Lorenzo Chivers, to the city for a moving job at the time. None of them have been heard from again. Russell reported her daughter as a missing child to authorities when she failed to return home from her father's visitation. Investigators initially believed that Paul had abducted Sarah, with Chivers' possible assistance. A warrant was issued for Paul's arrest, and authorities thought the disappearances might be related to a possible custody battle. The investigation changed direction almost 3 weeks later when the Tough Movers vehicle, a white 1978 Chevrolet moving truck with red crescents painted on both sides, was located shortly after Russell contacted the authorities. Investigators discovered the vehicle had been abandoned in the Westminster parking lot used by Paul's company. It wasn't parked the way he normally positioned it. The truck had been pierced by 2 bullets and was smeared with blood. A piece of human scalp with hair attached was inside. There was additional hair on the truck's fender, and shell casings and blood were found in the lot as well. There was no sign of Sarah, Paul, or Lorenzo at the scene. Lorenzo's car was found parked in the lot, but Paul's vehicle was located in Denver, Colorado. DNA tests proved that the blood on the truck's door was Paul's. The blood on the ground outside was Paul and Sarah's. The piece of scalp was from Paul, and the hair was Sarah's. Authorities changed the classification of the missing persons cases at that time to endangered missing and announced that foul play was suspected in the disappearances. The truck's 3-foot by 10-foot metal loading ramp, straps, and moving blankets were missing from the vehicle. Authorities believe the ramp may contain evidence related to the cases. Investigators believe Lorenzo, Paul, and Sarah were ambushed and killed when they returned the truck to the lot. They believe Paul was the probable target, and his daughter and Lorenzo were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murderer or murderers may have used the moving truck to dispose of the bodies. Investigators dredged several lakes around the Denver, Colorado area in an effort to locate Sarah, Paul, and Lorenzo's remains. No evidence was produced during the searches. It was believed that authorities were preparing to make an arrest in connection with the case in August of 1999, but that report proved to be false. No one has been charged with any involvement in any of the disappearances. Sarah is described as a friendly, outgoing, caring, and talkative girl. She enjoys dancing, singing, school, animals, and movies, and she is a good swimmer. Some agencies may report that Sarah, Paul, and Lorenzo disappeared from Granby, Colorado. Sarah was 4'5" and weighed 80 pounds. She was 9 years old, with blonde hair and hazel eyes. Paul Carroll Skiba was 6'1", weighed 170 pounds, and was 38 years old, with brown hair and blue eyes. He may use the alias Craig Michael Nelson. Lorenzo Deshawn Shivers was 36 years old. He's 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighs 160 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes. Their cases remain unsolved.
And from later that year,
from the American Alpine Club in the year 2000, missing climbers, severe weather. In Washington on Mount Rainier's Muir snowfield, Chris Hartness and Raymond Vakili disappeared while climbing to Camp Muir on November 5th, 1999. Hartness and Vakili were experienced mountaineers, and both men had been to Camp Muir before. Hartness was an avid park visitor and mountain climber, known by many on the Park Service staff for his frequent ascents to Camp Muir, particularly under adverse weather conditions. An extensive 10-day search ensued. Park rangers, Rainier mountaineering guides, volunteer mountain rescue, friends of the men, and search dog teams participated. Severe weather that included heavy snowfall and rain, high winds, and whiteouts hampered efforts throughout much of the operation. U.S. Army Reserve and private helicopters supported ground teams with aerial reconnaissance during periods of clear weather. The search was concluded on November the 16th with no clues of the two climbers being found. This was the fourth serious incident on the Muir snowfield in 1999. Without clues, it's difficult to speculate what exactly happened to the men and their equipment. It's perplexing when two experienced, cautious, and mature climbers just disappear. They were well equipped, and Hartness was very familiar with the area. Both men have a history of good decision-making in the mountains, and neither had a reputation for pushing it.
for all of 2000, we only have a handful of FBI timeline entries, primarily because the killer, from mid-January until June, he was deployed with the U.S. Army overseas. He does have a car rental in January and another in July, and a handful of entries from his own journal. And there's one event from the year 2000 that isn't on the FBI timeline, but it's a concert at Key Arena in Seattle, Washington. And that concert was on September 22nd, 2000. As far as the killer's computer, there's only one missing person from the year 2000 that showed up on his computer in the comparison searches. And that case was the February 14th, 2000 disappearance of Asha Degree in North Carolina. We had a handful of missing persons that we looked at, even though we knew he'd been out of the country for at least half the year, including Leah Roberts, Tina Denman, Rosemary Kuntz, Ruth Ann Ruppert, and Michael Barker.
Tina Jean Denman was last seen in Lakewood, Washington on June 5th, 2000. She has never been heard from again. Tina was 15 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 100 pounds. She has brown hair and heterochromia, so Tina's left eye is blue and her right eye is brown. Few details are available in her case, and it remains unsolved.
Rosemary Teresa Kunst resided in San Anselmo, California at the time of her disappearance. In August 2000, she attended a weekend retreat hosted by the Earth Circle Association in Quartz Valley, California. She and the other guests camped in the Marble Mountain Wilderness, 20 miles from Etna, California. At 9 a.m. on August 18, 2000, Rosemary stayed behind in camp while her companions went on a hike for the day. She apparently decided to go for a short hike by herself that afternoon. She was carrying only a sandwich, some trail mix, and her journal at the time. She never returned to camp and has never been seen nor heard from again. She was last seen at the south end of Spirit Lake walking towards a ridge. The Spirit Lake area is very steep and rugged with a lot of timber and boulders. Investigators believe Rosemary became lost. Her family says she was not despondent at the time of her disappearance and has no history of leaving without warning. Extensive searches turned up no sign of her, besides a tuft of her hair which was found caught in some heavy brush south of Spirit Lake. Rosemary was 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed 120 pounds. She had gray hair and hazel eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was 70 years old. Rosemary Teresa Kuntz would be 90 years old now. Her case remains unsolved. Ruth Ann Rupert was last seen in the Curry Village area or near the Yosemite Medical Clinic at Yosemite National Park at noon on August 14, 2000. She had planned to go on a backpacking trip in the park but had to postpone due to an illness. She may have gone on a day hike from Yosemite Falls to the Foresta area. She has never been heard from again. In 2008, Ruth Ann's backpack was found in the Fireplace Creek drainage. This would have been along her hiking route from the Yosemite to the Foresta area. There was no other sign of her, and her case remains unsolved. Ruth Ann was 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed 140 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes, one of which was a prosthetic. At the time of her disappearance, she was 49 years old. Ruth Ann Rupert would be 69 years old now.
Michael Jeffrey Barker went missing from Marble Mount, Washington in July of 2000. The victim disappeared and is presumed to have drowned while kayaking on the Cascade River. He's 5 feet 10 inches tall, 160 pounds. He has brown hair and blue eyes.
Peggy Eileen Humber was last seen leaving her residence in the vicinity of the 4400 block of Santa Cruz Street in Bakersfield, California, to travel either to a local store or to visit a friend in Oildale, California on June 23, 2000. She was driving her maroon 1994 or 1997 Dodge Intrepid with the California license plate number 3XYE766 at the time. The car was discovered abandoned in the Sequoia National Forest, approximately 20 miles north of Johnsondale, California, shortly after her disappearance. There was no sign of Humber at the scene, and she has never been heard from again. Authorities believe she vanished under suspicious circumstances. Peggy was 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 145 pounds. She had brown eyes and brown hair. At the time of her disappearance, she was 45 years old. Peggy Eileen Humber would be 64 years old now.
Leah Toby Roberts dropped out of college in Durham, North Carolina during her senior year in 2000 and spent most of her time at Cup of Joe, a coffee house in the city. Roberts' loved ones said that she was interested in learning more about her spirituality in 2000. She was coping with the deaths of both of her parents and had been seriously injured in an automobile accident several years prior to her disappearance. She wrote poetry and journal entries during the day and was intrigued with the writings of Jack Kerouac, the 1950s beatnik author. One of Roberts' favorite novels was Kerouac's 1958 autobiographical book, Dharma Burns, which was set in the Whatcom County, Washington area. Roberts loved traveling and set out for the Northwest United States on March 9, 2000. She did not share her plans with her loved ones, but she did leave a note for her roommate. Roberts stated in the letter that she was not suicidal and mentioned her fascination with Kerouac's writings. Roberts took her kitten, Bee, and drove her white 1993 Jeep Cherokee with a North Carolina license plate, JVP 2881. Roberts' vehicle was discovered wrecked and abandoned on a logging road in Whatcom County, Washington on March 18, 2000, 9 days after she left North Carolina. The Jeep was located near an embankment off of Mount Baker Highway at the foot of the Cascade Mountains, which is approximately 85 miles north of Seattle, Washington. Authorities discovered a fuel purchase receipt dated during the early morning hours of March 13th from Brooks, Oregon, inside of Roberts' vehicle. A ticket stub for a March 13th showing of the film American Beauty at the Theater and Bellis Fair Mall in Bellingham, Washington, was also recovered. Cat food was found inside the Jeep as well. Roberts' guitar, compact disc, and checkbook were scattered near the scene. $2,500 in cash was tucked inside a pair of pants. Blankets had been placed over the vehicle's broken windows, signaling that someone had sought protection from the elements. There was no sign of Roberts or her kitten at the scene, and no evidence of foul play was discovered. A witness told authorities that he and his wife believed they saw Roberts at a Texaco gas station in Everett, Washington, shortly after her vehicle was found abandoned. The man said said the woman appeared to be disoriented and did not recall her identity. He terminated his conversation with investigators before he could provide additional details. Authorities believe his sighting was valid and that the man panicked during the phone call for undetermined reasons. There are several theories as to what may have happened to Roberts. Investigators believe she may have headed towards Mount Baker Highway after her accident and was possibly picked up by a passing motorist. She may have suffered injuries during the wreck and could have been disoriented, as the witness stated, as a result of her condition. Some people have speculated that an unknown individual was driving Roberts' vehicle at the time of the accident and that foul play may have been involved in her disappearance. There is little evidence to support any theory regarding her whereabouts. Extensive searches of the area around her wreck provided few clues in her disappearance. Roberts was a soccer player during her college years. She was 23 years old. She was 5'6", 130 pounds. She had sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. Roberts had a surgical scar on her right hip. She has a metal rod inside the entire length of her femur as a result of previous injuries sustained in an automobile accident. Her ears are pierced and she has dimples. Roberts is a vegetarian and smokes cigarettes. She has a strong southern accent and she speaks fluent Spanish. Her case remains unsolved.
And with Leah Roberts, we found an unidentified body along the way that we felt like might have something to do with her case. Someone else had outlined this theory, so I'm going to put that in the show notes of this episode if you'd like to take a look at it.
During this time period, we weren't sure if Robert Lee Yates, the serial killer, was still operating in the same area. There was also Scott Lee Kimball and Neil Falls, who were rumored to have operated in some of the same areas as this killer. It's also worth noting that where the killer did the bulk of his time with the U.S. Army was very close to where he grew up, where in 1992, we tracked down at least 10 cases of animal mutilation that couldn't really be accounted for. In that concert the killer went to, there was a missing persons case suspiciously close to that.
Jennifer May Inyart was last seen on September 21st, 2000 in the city of Tacoma, Washington. Jennifer Inyart was 5'3" tall and weighed 130 pounds. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. Few details are known in her case. Jennifer may use one of several aliases, including Rochelle Smith or Jennifer Smith. Her case remains unsolved.
There was even a suspicious Oregon case that there was a journal entry noting that the killer was doing training in the field with the U.S. Army. This was in October of 2000.
Victor Manuel Flores was last seen on July 12, 2000 in Wolf Creek, Oregon. He had black hair and brown eyes. Victor was 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 150 pounds. Victor's 1992 Pontiac was found with the keys in the ignition at the intersection of Miller and Coyote Creek Road.
And there were a few more cases that we took a hard look at, but we couldn't decide if the killer was involved or not.
Sarah Skunk was reported missing on February 15, 2000 from Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. She was rumored to have been heading towards Seattle when she disappeared sometime before then. She had black hair and brown eyes. She was 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds. It is unknown what the victim's date of last contact was. Kim Marie Roach went missing in June of 2000. Her vehicle was later located on Onion Mountain over an embankment with no signs of Kim. Her purse and wallet were inside. Kim Roach was 5 feet tall and weighed 110 pounds. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
Hazel Lydia Shamlin was last seen at approximately 7 o'clock p.m. on October 20th, 2000 in Winston, Oregon. She was dropping off her grandson at Douglas High School at the time. Shamlin was driving her red 1990 Toyota Corolla station wagon with the Oregon license plate number QMV062. The vehicle's right rear fender was damaged at the time. Shamlin has never been heard from again. Hunters discovered Shamlin's station wagon abandoned in November 2000, nearly 1 month after she disappeared. The vehicle was parked near a ravine in the Glen Creek area, which is several miles from the Douglas County, Coos County, Oregon line. There was no sign of Shamlin at the scene. A search of the surrounding rough terrain produced no clues as to her whereabouts. Shamblin's family members believe that she would not have driven to the location unless she was assisting someone. Authorities are uncertain if she drove her vehicle herself or if someone else parked her car in the area. Investigators said that Shamlin was showing symptoms of mild memory loss at the time of her disappearance. They said it was possible that she became disoriented and wandered away from her station wagon. Shamblin's loved ones said that it is extremely uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. She resided in the 1000 block of Reston Road, 10 Mile, Oregon, in 2000. She was a well-known community volunteer. Her family held a memorial service for her in October 2001, 1 year after she vanished. Shamblin was 86 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 124 pounds. She had gray hair, hazel eyes, and she wears eyeglasses. Shamblin's case remains
Now
unsolved.
I can't remember why I started talking about it.
Well, okay, so hold on. I'm gonna say something here. There's a bird. So I'm stepping inside, so I'm away from the bird. So here's where I hang my hat there. When you say he had a preference for young, pretty girls, I agree. And the reason I say that is he just didn't say it. I have a preference for young, pretty girls. What he said was, I would wait in the woods and I would be at a particular place and other people come there, but only so many. I might not get exactly what I wanted, which was a young, pretty girl, but it was something.
Right. And I feel like that's where, to him, like, that's where he was, like, exercising self-control. Just like he doesn't do anything to kids. Like, that was him, like...
taking what he could get.
I know, it seems so ridiculous.
It's a disturbing interpretation, but it is true.
It is, because I feel like I remember the discussion that was being had there. I feel like it's always a good idea to listen once you've asked a question.
Right.
And I feel like a lot was missed. But I also feel like I wish that Agent Godin, Jolene, I wish she had asked more questions, because he didn't hate her. He didn't have like this apathetic disdain towards her like he did some of the other investigators. And I feel like when she talked to him, he was more likely to answer. And, she did a good job as far as sort of explaining things when the guys hit brick walls, because they would just, it just wasn't a good conversation a lot of times. And she sort of broke that ice. And I feel like she had just asked a few more things. It would have been really good, but that didn't happen. And obviously we're not going to get that chance again. So even they say it in the interview. Keith says it. He says, hindsight 2020 and all. I shouldn't have given you any information, because let's face it, you wouldn't have found any of this stuff or known any of this stuff if I hadn't given it to you. And, that's obviously true for everybody in the room. And there is but, you wanted to do this for the victims and their families. And that's not the case at all. Like, he never cared about that. He wanted to get himself put to death that's his only objective there.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, well, no. Well, where we started this was you were talking about his preference for young, pretty girls, but he wasn't a pedophile. That was a distinction that he was making to himself. It was a rule to some degree, because he wasn't ever going to talk about cases that involved, the borderline for him, from what I can tell, matched the age of his daughter during the interviews. So she would have been 10 and then 11 in the course of these interviews.
Do you think he killed a lot of girls that were younger than that?
Not at all. I don't think.
Okay.
I don't have it. I have him down. I think I only have him down for one possibility under that age, maybe two. One boy and one girl is what I have on my list that fall under that age. But the distinction there is important, because what he considers a kid is under the age of 12.
Right, but I also think that a physical appearance had a lot to do with it as well. I don't think that he would have targeted like a prepubescent child at all.
Agree. But if you have more thoughts about Suzanne Lyle, we can talk about her again. And if there's anything else from 98 or 99, we can talk about that. I'm covering the ones you sent me and a few additional thoughts on 99. And then I'm going back to Suzanne Lyle and addressing some of the Courier stuff and using what you said today to compare 2012 keys to like 1998 keys and how it's different.
Right.
And then we'll move forward after that. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm glad to get out of this sort of murky area, but I see myself coming back to it shortly with a clearer picture, but I don't know for sure. And I don't want this on the recording, so can I say it or not?
Yeah, you can say it. You want me to call back?
Yeah, why don't you call me back not recording? Yeah,
okay.
That's good.
I'm doing that now. All right, bye.
Meg and I have spoken at length about the case of Suzanne Lyle, and you can find more about her case on the podcast Upstate Unsolved. When we first started researching her case, we had considered that she might be the first victim of this killer, and she is on his computer. However, over time, we've come to the decision that maybe he got some of his ideas from her case, but that the proximity to where he lived and where he left for the military was probably a little too close, too convenient, and too coincidental. I will throw in the caveat that if she happens to be his victim, then the body locations still apply. And this is one case I truly hope does see some resolution.
Hi. Not like that. Like this. Not normal, but it looks better.
Susie was 19. She would have been 20 on April 6th of that year.
What are you doing over there?
We do not know what happened to her. It's like a needle in a haystack. She just vanished.
It was last Monday night. The 19-year-old got off a CDTA bus at UAlbany's Uptown campus. She hasn't been seen nor heard from
right
since.
Here at this bus stop where she was last seen at 7:30.
When her dorm room was looked at later, it looked as if she was coming back.
Make straight pieces of hair look curly.
Her hair dryer was on the bed. All her personal items were still there. She had money on top of her desk, change, money.
Lyle's ATM card was used at this Albany Stewart shop the day after her disappearance.
But her ATM card was used the day following her, her disappearance in a convenience store that, was one that she wouldn't have gone to on her own.
Which was about 2 miles from the campus. The password was a direct hit.
Her boyfriend was the one. Rich told us that she was missing, and I believe he said, "Did you know that Suzanne didn't come home last night?" or something to that effect.
There's always been a question, why the boyfriend, who was only about 5 minutes away from the college, didn't get in his car that night and go and check to see where his girlfriend was.
Hi. Okay, so something for homecoming.
It's disturbing to us that the family and Susie's boyfriend, Rich, choose not to answer questions at this point to maybe illuminate or to revisit some of the unanswered questions.
I want her back.
Getting frustrated with my eyeliner and you're videotaping me.
I don't care how I get her back, but I want her back.
So just circling back to 98 to 2001 for a second. So I have it on record now. Suzanne Lyle, what do you think about Suzanne Lyle overall? Is victim or no victim?
Do you just want my answer or you want the explanation?
Well, I have time for either one right now.
Okay, well, I can give you my opinion. It is entirely possible that Susie Lyle was Israel Keyes' victim. I believe that there's some compelling information that was provided to the FBI from a credible source that perhaps she had seen someone that looked like Israel Keyes in a parking lot. And, there was information sort of leading that way. Not to mention, so we're talking about March of 1998. Okay, and so I'm sure you'll put the information in, but essentially Susie Lyle left work on a bus to go back to her college dorm room, and she exited the bus at sort of a central bus stop within the university, and she disappeared. There's never been there was the ATM usage the following day, but basically she vanished. Now, That is a type of Israel Keyes vanishing. But a couple things I consider in this case is that she was taken sort of like right in the middle of everything. I don't believe that there's been any witnesses come forward as far as like seeing her be taken. I feel like the time of day, which was, it would have been dark and it would have been nighttime, but I think it would have been like early nighttime. At Babbage's, yeah.
And store closed at 9. She got onto a CDTA bus, which is like Capital District Transportation Authority. They took her back to campus. She got on that bus at 9:20. The driver confirmed he had seen her get on the bus. However, he wasn't sure where she got off. She typically got off at Collins Circle, which is like a short walk away from her dorm. A friend of Suzanne's says that they saw her get off the bus there. That would have been around 9:45 p.m. And then she's never been seen after that, ever.
A couple of things. I'm making assumptions here. I assume that, like most college campuses, I was actually in college later in 1998, but not there or anything. But it would have been a little early for Keyes, I think, like in the day. Like I feel like it would have been a little later for his ideal situation. He sort of had this, I don't know, philosophy or mantra or his guidelines for himself. I mean, we know he made rules, but, you know, this is really early. This is actually before he went into the Army. So, you know, he's filling out situations. Taking somebody on a college campus like that, to me, eventually, it was on the college campus, right?
Within feet of it, yes.
Okay. So, basically his very first thing was no witnesses and no body. That's like, I've heard him say that. I've read things. Okay. So I don't necessarily think that would be a good place to start. So
well, we
saying
don't think
that
he started there. Like, we think he started earlier, potentially.
Well, I still feel like this would be this, like even if she were his second or third or fourth victim, he's still starting out. You see what I'm saying? Like,
he's still early. I
don't see him acting like that. Now, nobody knows, you know, how far she got. Like, where was she walking to her dorm room? Is there a possibility that there was, you know, a dark corner where there were no witnesses? She was I believe, 18 years old. At least 18. So, you know, nobody heard her. Like, there's a combination of things that sort of don't make sense for Keyes, particularly. I feel like there was okay, so she's the case where there was somebody who used her ATM.
They used her ATM for the exact amount that was in there, and they knew the PIN number, which was something she and her boyfriend knew and no one else.
Now, that is a telltale Keyes thing much later. Like, we know that he used Samantha Koenig's ATM card and that he had, like, scratched the PIN number onto it. And, like, he had attempted, like, he got the courier's ATM cards and he had put the PIN on them, but they didn't have, like, a lot of money. So I don't think he actually used those. But, like, that was a thing he did.
Like, one of my hesitations with this is he seems pretty reticent to do that with Samantha Koenig and with the couriers. So I wonder, how does that play into this? Like, was that an early attempt where he learned his lesson that didn't make sense or something, or was it something else?
Well, no, because he continued on and did it. I mean, he did it, like, all the way up to Samantha Koenig. Samantha Koenig, he had in mind that he was going to, you know, get the ATM card, the PIN number, and there's even a conversation that takes place where she's like, I don't have any money. He's like, that's okay, they'll get it, which he was absolutely right. Money started coming in, and it was put in the account. Now, it didn't seem like there was any contact with Susie Lyle's family as far as, like, a kidnapping type thing.
Not that we're aware of, no.
Right, and they've been extraordinarily vocal, and I feel like that would have come up, right?
Yes.
I know that police looked at, because wasn't that the Nike hat guy or whatever?
There were four suspects in that case, but one is they refer to him as Nikes, and that's like when the ATM withdrawals was done, there was like a weird camera over the clerk type situation where it didn't capture the whole person, but it captured someone was sort of avoiding a camera is the idea. That's not exactly what happened, but that's the idea. And he had a record. He was someone from campus who had a record. So he was sort of a suspect. There was a boyfriend, a long-term boyfriend that was a suspect. And they had this guy, John Regan, Regan was actually later, I think 2005 or 2006, Regan was on trial for a kidnapping that took place in Connecticut in the 90s where he had gone to a high school there, and he was he was doing like a sort of a stranger danger abduction where he had pulled a girl into a van. The idea was that possibly he was involved, although he refused to talk to investigators about the Lyle case. I think what he got hit for was attempted kidnapping, so it wasn't like he was doing life in prison. He refused to talk to investigators, and he refused to talk to her family about it at all. And there was someone else in there that was cleared as well. I'd have to look up that case again, but basically there were 3 or 4 suspects, and none of those panned.
The vanishing, that's definitely a key thing. But the fact that I can't imagine that close to a college campus, and he may have not known different, but I can't imagine him feeling like there would be no witnesses because, there are always people around on college campuses. It doesn't matter. They're just, somebody's always watching. I mean,
one of the big things that has been linked to other people that caught my eye was that is where the Army recruiting station was. The Army recruiting station was close by, and a couple of people have covered her case. She's going to come up. I considered giving that case its own spotlight, and I think to some degree I will. Although another podcast, Upstate Unsolved, has covered it really in depth, and they sort of it wasn't that they ruled Keyes out. It's that they had this other, that's where the other guy came from. It might be Regan. They had this other situation that they were examining with a traveling salesman doing it. It's not that I think he did it or didn't do it. With this killer and that situation, there are certain things that line up, like you said, the vanishing, the use of the ATM card. That is actually fairly unique. It's not unique in terms of home invasions and robberies, and it's a thing that, is done quite a bit. But for someone to also vanish when that happens is sort of unique. And her case is one of those that I read through a lot of psychic tips at one point, not related to the situation we're dealing with now, but just I read about her case, and everybody kept saying that she was submerged in water. It was 15 separate psychics in a year period or something, or 2-year period, had all said she's submerged in water. I never looked at her from the perspective of could I find her body until this? And I actually have so if it's him, I have 2 potential locations for her just because of the weird makeup of Albany. And I had considered at one point maybe she's the New York body, but that didn't really that didn't line up for me. And taking her and then taking $20 from her, that was weird.
Well, and how much was in the account? If that's $20. All there was, that was all there was?
Yeah, they had some kind of setup where she would call her mom, and mom would put in just the amount she needed. And so what her mom said was unusual about that was something to the effect of Susie rarely asks for more than $20 in a day. And for some reason, she took $20 and mom had just put another $20 in there, and then that was gone. So that was one of the things they had marked up as unusual with regard to that.
I bet that was really disappointing.
What do you mean?
Well, if I don't know who went to the ATM, but that there was $20 in there, I think that would have been really disappointing.
To me, that almost made it seem more like this killer.
Keith?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because, at first, when he first checked Samantha Koenig's account, there was $5 in there. And I do feel you know, a lot of time, I feel like, you know, a lot of people have very little money in their checking account. And I feel like on, you know, any given day, he would be up the creek, but that would have been really discouraging if that was the case. Now, if I remember, I had a couple of thoughts additionally, and so I don't know how publicized her case was when it happened.
Okay, so here's the deal with that. Like, if you were right there in that area, it was highly publicized. Now, this unfolded over a period of time, but what happened was the boyfriend's family got so fed up with the insinuations that they actually put up a billboard trying to find the Nike guy. And that is what jogged loose. There were a series of events leading up to her disappearance that mom's recollection, like Suzanne Lyle's mom's recollection of it, was that she felt like Susie was breaking up with the boyfriend. So the boyfriend's family had gone to pretty great lengths to try and
exonerate him.
Right, to exonerate him. Now there was another investigation that they linked to it. I think that might have been the boyfriend's family doing it, but it was a weird one. It was like Karen Wilson, maybe? I don't remember if she was SUNY Albany or not, but that would have been like in 83 or 85. I think they tried to link those two things together and do the billboard. And that was so if you were there, the Nike cap or Nike shoes or whatever, that was like on a billboard, and that was a thing that like you would have known about. As far as like they put up money for it, you know, there were flyers everywhere. It was one of those type cases where, you know, there's people that are organizing and sort of disseminating information. You know, it took it a little while to gain steam, and that was always interesting to me because the timing of the billboard and gaining steam would have happened as the school year wound down, which is when this guy would have gone military. He's going into the military processing and everything and becoming a soldier in July. He would have missed some of it, so I don't know if that would count as publicity or not, but if you were standing there in the local area, it absolutely would have been, but it would have looked like they were looking for someone else.
Right. I don't know if I made this up, but wasn't there a possibility that like one of her friends maybe had said she thought she was being stalked?
There was an incident where during one of the supplemental interviews that they do in these types of situations, someone said she had, I don't know if it was a known suspect or not. I'm trying to think of how that went. But so the Babbages she worked in was in a mall.
Right.
Suzanne had told her friend that someone had been following her or unfolded like a month or two. It was like right when they got back from Christmas, before Valentine's Day, I think is what I read, that she believed someone was following her or someone had a crush on her or something. The sentence that stands out from that part of the report that I read way back then, I think she said she wasn't afraid of him.
Right. Okay. So, you know, I take that into consideration as far as, you know, could it have been that person? I believe that one of the things that really sticks out in my mind is that they had found her like work tag or something, but it wasn't until later, maybe after the snow. I don't know if there was snow. I don't know.
It was her ID badge, like her name badge showed up, and it was once so you have snow there. So she disappears in March, and then I don't know how like long ago it was, but the idea was they had cleared the lot and the badge looked weathered. Like the
okay,
badge,
like it had been there perhaps since she disappeared.
Yeah. Like it's like one of those little things that you put on, like, you know, it would say, "My name is Suzanne," and
okay.
It looked like it had been there the whole time. And when they plowed the lot, somebody found it.
Well, and so my line of thinking with this case is the 2012 version of Israel Keys the fact that if he enlisted in the Albany Center that was across the street or in the vicinity of where she disappeared, he absolutely did not take her, the 2012 Israel Keys. Okay.
Right.
If the name tag was in fact left behind, like that absolutely was not Israel Keys. The 2012 Israel Keys. He wouldn't have left something like that. And, you know, who knows? I guess it's possible if she was taken, which it seems by, you know, everything, all accounts, she was taken, perhaps she took it off herself trying to leave a trail, you know, you know what I mean? Like, who knows what she was thinking?
Right.
I think that I haven't like ruled it out to the point where I say absolutely not. I really don't feel like he is responsible for Susie Lyle's disappearance because of my impression of him in 2012. Because I know for sure in 2012 he would not have taken someone from anywhere near. He would have had an association with like enlisting in the Army. He would not have left any sort of personal effect behind. And he would have not, he didn't take people from anywhere that there could be witnesses. And he stayed as under the radar as possible. And there's also the possibility he did do it. And from that, he learned, don't do it anything near where you're at. But, you know, he's already explained that he had to look over the river after the Moken incident, like the whole rest of the summer he was working. And so he had sort of decided, like, I don't want to do stuff close to where I'm at. Now, it's a little different if he lived in Constable, enlisted in the Army in Albany, you know, took her from SUNY at Albany. And so that could have been different in his mind, and he just made a further distinction. I feel like if he had been the one that took $20 out of his account, he would have bailed on that idea immediately because that certainly wasn't worth $20.
Well, we don't have evidence of him doing that for years. The next time he did it's 2011 that we know of. And the other thing is, like, if you look at, there are some similarities between Samantha Koenig and Suzanne Lyle.
What do you find similar?
Well, a lot of people bookend those two. A lot of people say, you know,
beginning end.
Yeah. So, you know, they look at it and they say, well, he was operating, you know, within miles of his house in Anchorage, and he took a girl from her work or right after work, or, you know, an 18-year-old blonde girl. So a lot of people, when you look at online discussions, when you listen to other audio dramas, that's not what it is, but when you listen to like true crime stuff, they talk about Suzanne Lyle being a potential victim of his. And I think they kind of hang their hat on young, pretty, blonde, vanished ATM card use. Because that does look like Samantha Koenig if you look at it from that perspective.
Right.
And as many times as we've discussed the case of Suzanne Lyle, we ultimately never have come to a conclusion. But the reason that she came up now is because we were looking at the case of a young woman who went missing, whose body was found that fit nearly everything else about this killer.
Tonight, we're hearing from the sister of Molly Bish as we come up on 19 years since Molly was abducted and killed. The family is still searching for answers. Western Mass News reporter James Villalobos joins us in studio with the latest efforts. James?
Yeah, Sarah, earlier today we met with Molly's sister Heather, and she tells us that the grieving process has been difficult, but it has not stopped the family from trying to find out who killed her sister. As a reminder, Molly disappeared from her lifeguard post at Cummins Pond in Warren back in June 2000. Her body was later found in the woods in Palmer, about 5 miles away. The latest tip in the investigation came during a 2014 campaign called Just One Piece, where someone gave a vehicle description that the suspect may have been driving the day that she disappeared. Heather says that the investigators continue to run DNA tests and are re-interviewing original persons of interest, as well as those who they haven't spoken to in a few years.
I think, I've always said it's just this like one piece that we're missing. I think we have the person in our purview. We just don't have the piece to connect to sort of make those next steps.
Heather is now drafting a bill for the state legislature that would make it easier for investigators to have access to a larger DNA base. Coming up tonight on Western Mass News, we'll explain in more detail what that bill will consist of. James Villalobos, Western Mass News.
This case has bothered us for a long time because it fits the killer in a lot of ways and some of the locations. However, part of the body was found. Now, this next news clip gets cut off, but I'm going to play it anyways. The very beginning, he's saying, would Molly Bish's killer? So you can hear the rest of it now.
Bish's killer go as far as burying an entire car to cover their tracks. Bish's sister is working with a private investigator who has received several tips that a car similar to one spotted by Molly Bish's mom is now buried at a campground. As Jim Smith explains tonight, that's where a search will take place later in the week.
And we are very close. We are very, very, very close.
Heather Bish will never give up. She'll never stop looking for answers in the murder of her younger sister, Molly, abducted from the shore of Cummins Pond in June of 2000. A 16-year-old lifeguard murdered by a suspect who has never been caught.
I miss my sister today as much as I did, the day she was gone. It's sort of like, learning to live without a limb.
Now, a new effort to find Molly's killer. Thursday, a criminologist will search a nearby campground with ground-penetrating radar after a tip that a car connected to the case might be buried there. A car seen by Molly's mother, driven by a suspect, she said gave her an uneasy feeling.
My mom saw the car the day before she disappeared, but we have information that the car was seen in the area by a couple different people. We're led to believe it's hidden somewhere. Is it in someone's garage or a barn or buried?
The Bish family is not alone. When close friends come to the pond, they too hope for the case to be solved one day.
It would mean the world. My best friend's little sister was abducted and murdered here in our small little quaint town, and I've watched it affect their family.
17 years is a very long time. But for the friends and family of Molly Bish, sometimes it can feel like yesterday. Now they're hoping high-tech detective help can somehow bring an end to a tragic mystery. In Warren, Jim Smith, WBZ News.
For the record, they found 26 of Molly Bish's bones, and the human body has 206. So there was a good reason that maybe they were looking for this car, or maybe they were looking for the rest of her body. So while she fit some of what we thought the killer would be looking for, and she combined two different types, being in a remote location and also being a young, pretty blonde, we wanted
to see if the killer would have been around during that time.
And that's when everything started to change. With the description of Wally and with some information about the killer's time immediately after he was in the Army, we started looking at different cases.
In an interview, it stated that after Keyes was deployed in 2000 to Egypt, which his deployment was from January 15th, 2000 to June 1st, 2000. He spent 6 to 8 months after his deployment to Egypt in Maine with his family, okay? And
I'm familiar with that.
Okay. And you had talked a little bit about possibly getting his Army records, which I probably give you the facts that I just stated, or maybe a couple additional ones. I don't even know if it has that on it. I'm interested to know how much freedom that he had while he was still in the Army, but not on deployment. Do you have any idea?
Well, so no, but the reason those records are redacted have nothing, they're not about his behavior. The records are redacted because they were part of another criminal proceeding that was sealed long time ago, back in 2001 or 2002. Generally speaking, he had some freedom. He could come and go from the base there. Each week there would be 2, maybe 3 days that he could do activities off base. He could potentially be off base in the evenings or
like if you were pulling watches, there would be some evenings and not others. And then there would specifically be a mandated amount of leave that he got per year or per month. There's a number of ways that he could have gotten leave and freedom while he was at the military base.
Okay, and that's what I was curious about because so putting aside, what happened before the Army, I can totally imagine him, and it seems to kind of through other things that in his mind, once he was back from Egypt, he was almost out of the Army. Okay. Like, I don't feel like a lot of action happened for him after his deployment ended. I know that there was some field training, but for the most part, I mean, there's, records of activities he was doing that were non-Army related. He returns from Egypt, June 2000. According to a post, the investigators interviewing this post-arrest, post-possible suicide, I'm not sure when the interview took place, a family member says he spent 6 to 8 months after his deployment to Egypt in Maine with his family. So that puts him pretty much wherever he wanted to be. I mean, he spent some time with his family across the country, right?
That seems to be what it's saying. And he definitely would not have necessarily been on Joint Base Lewis McChord that entire time. I don't know about 6 to 8 months away, but because of some of the circumstances related to whatever the sealed matter is, which seems to be greater than an Article 15 hearing, meaning a court's martials of some kind, he would have had some time away from his unit. I don't know if he would have been able to spend 6 to 8 months in Maine, but he could have spent several different times together that looked like 6 to 8 months in Maine.
Right. And I'm not saying anything except that's the memory. So to me, that's a pretty substantial amount of time. It just made me realize that it was probably more flexible than I imagined it to be initially. There's time. So he started basically doing some things that show up that indicate basically what you just said. It had, if he did spend 6 to 8 months in Maine with his family, it was not consecutive because we have certain things happening in Washington after he returned from Egypt that aren't in Maine, like picking up an engagement ring and going on a family retreat with his girlfriend and going into training. So there's certain things that I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around sort of what was happening based on the discussion that spent a lot of time with his family after deployment. I believe somebody even says, it was the closest we'd ever been when he came back home during that time. And I'm pretty sure he never actually, when he returned to his family, he wasn't returning to a home he had ever lived in because he left New York to be enlisted in New York to join the Army. Okay. The date of his honorable discharge from the Army is July of 2001.
So it turns out the killer may have been around for cases like Molly Bish.
We needed to look closer at the location surrounding her disappearance and where her body was found to determine if somewhere between Commons Pond and the old Sawmill campground, the rest of her might be discovered. But she wasn't a focus case because technically her case is closed, her body is recovered. They're simply looking for her murderer. And it wasn't that we were going to set her to the side. It's just we weren't sure that we could help. And then we went back to take one last look at one of the last interviews where this killer was being pressured by the FBI to give up further information, particularly information about some writings that had been found in his cell.
That's exactly what we've told you for the last 6 months or more. Yeah, I understand that. So, what about, just the idea of, and I'm just thinking along the lines of what, we tell criminologists sort of stand down, even just a clue that doesn't give up anything from your perspective, but at least gives everybody something to work with behind the scenes, nothing that we, have to kind of go and publicize to the world. But a clue about, one of the past murders that it's really not going to reveal anything. So you're not playing any cards, but at least where then going back to these guys' bosses and to Vermont and saying, look, he's given us a clue in exchange for this sort of discretion and for everybody to kind of stand down, so to speak.
Well, first of all, I don't know. You already have.
Sure.
You already have a lot of clues that I don't know about. You know, you have that computer.
So you wouldn't be giving anything away?
I'm just saying I think you have a lot of background on me at this point. Sure. I'm sure that I don't even remember at this point. So.
The bosses above us, though, don't know what's on that computer. Beth and I know what's on that computer. So let's just use Frank's example for a second. So if you were to give us a clue, they don't know, our bosses don't know what, I'm being recorded. Our bosses don't know what is on that computer. So they're not going to know.
Next time.
So they're not going to know if we already knew that or not.
Vermont doesn't know either. They haven't seen the evidence. So you could be giving us nothing, but at least it's something we report to them.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
reported that he committed a murder in X day. Okay, yeah, big deal. It's not going to give us anything after, given the timeline that you set forward, 14 years, but at least it's some sort of sign of progress. We can go back and say, no, he's actually given us a clue and things are moving forward, and they can sort of feel good about themselves for not doing.
When you say clue, are you talking about giving you names or
No.
what?
You keep the name, but give us the name of
Give us a
the
state or something.
state and a time frame. Hey,
You already know some of the states.
sure,
Sure.
but give us something that we
Doesn't matter.
progress from where we were months ago. Is what we're looking for. I mean, Frank hadn't talked about this clue idea, but something that we don't. Obviously, you can tell us something we already have discussed in here. That's not progress.
Because everybody knows what's been discussed in here, but, let's assume it's something, from your perspective, you're not giving us anything, because you think, hey, we already have it, it's a clue, and it's just something that gives us credibility that we can report, even though, maybe this is just sort of fiction that you give us, New York, New Jersey, all right, well, you told us New Jersey, or, something other thing that we can kind of report back that, allows us a little bit of credibility with the people that we have to deal with.
Right. Something.
Did you find any knives in New York or in the boat? Folding knives. They're about 6 inches long.
I don't know. I think there might have been in the boat. You
think
told us
I can
you thought there was knives in the boat, right?
I think there was a knife in the
There's
boat.
2 knives that were not in Kimberly's house, and I don't know where they were. I thought they were in that bucket. I thought that they were. I may have left one in New York, or I thought there might have been one in the boat. Just knives that I had from a long time ago. But I haven't seen them in any of the pictures, so I don't.
You asked Ted or
I can find out about the boat. I don't think there was a knife found in the boat. I don't remember a knife being in the bucket, though, in the photos.
The knife that was there was a folding knife years and years ago.
But why is that knife important?
Well, it's a folding knife, so I don't know. If you took it apart, you might.
Would there be blood on the knife?
There might not on it, but maybe inside.
is it the kind that has the handles are actually bolted or screwed to it or something? It's not a solid piece. In other words, you can disassemble it in some manner.
Yeah, it's like riveted together.
Would the blood be from a long time ago or just the knife?
No, the blood's not from a long time ago, but I haven't carried it for a while, so I couldn't remember when I left it.
Any other places where it might be?
No, I don't.
Well, it was in the boat. It was a long time ago.
Well,
2005.
right. Yeah,
associated with the Washington murders?
Yeah.
On those lines, while I'm waiting for Ted to respond.
Ted's the guy that you met with a lot of time was up here. He's the one who did the photo search.
From Ted, on those lines. We talked to someone out at the lab when we were talking about, when the time comes when you decide that you want to give additional information so that we're prepared on what we need to do to be able to respond quickly. We asked about, what are the chances of if there is someone that is, if there's a body at the bottom of the lake, what are the chances of that body still being intact 7 years later, or that kind of thing? What are we going to be looking for, and what do we need to have in place in order to be able to find that? And one of the things that they said, which might be of interest to you, is depending on how the body was put down there, it's possible that the body is actually very intact. If the body was just tied to something and dropped it to the bottom of the lake, there's definitely still going to be long bones and that kind of stuff. You won't have finger bones and that kind of stuff. There'll be femurs and long bones and that kind of thing. If the body was contained in something, even a bag of some sort, it's very possible that the body could still be intact, depending on the depth of the lake. All of that determines the kind of equipment that we would need in order to locate the body. And so, obviously not asking you for details about where and who and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the Washington bodies, were they contained in something, or were they just tied to the milk jugs? I mean, is it something where we might possibly actually still get it intact?
No.
No, okay. And that's helpful for them to know, because that's a whole different type of search that it would have to be than a different type of equipment. Let me just try to call them. I'll step out and try to call them. This is not answering this question.
And do you, I guess, because I'm kind of getting a different vibe now, do you still envision in the future us working together to the point where we can get this information?
Yeah, I don't see how we're going to get anything else done. I just,
I mean, you're waiting for, whatever you're waiting for to find out. But
yeah, I have concerns with current issues, but, I can definitely foresee down the road there's going to be a lot more that can be resolved.
Okay. And that's good.
By going about it in a different manner.
Okay. Well, but that's good information, because we'll be able to pass that on if you're still open and you're still.
No, I haven't. My outlook on this, as far as the ultimate end result, hasn't really changed. It's just has more to do with timelines and expectations, I guess.
But and the balancing game that we're talking about doing is we're just trying to keep everybody happy the best we can till we get to that point, and that's kind of a difficult balancing act for us.
Right. And it sounds like you're holding on to some of this stuff to trade it for something you might need later. True?
Well, yeah, because I'm not going to have much else to.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, this whole clue idea, might give us a little short-term solution to kind of keep this thing moving the way we want it to move. And maybe even gets you something in the short term. If you're thinking about, like, I don't know, you come, you give a clue, and, you want lunch or something like that. I mean, that's something that can be worked out.
You need a candy bar.
I know, that's what I think, I don't know if he feels guilty about it, but.
If you had a cigar, you'd probably pass out if you had a cigar right now.
But I mean, the notion of this whole idea is, hey, you come over, we keep things going, at least on a smaller scale. You're not giving up anything in terms of trading value, but you're giving us credibility with other people we have to deal with. You're not giving us any useful information really, other than, all right, well, we got, you know, a knife in Washington. It's not like we're gonna solve the clue game on that, like, you know, Professor Plum in the library and type of thing. But it gives us a little bit of, you know, stuff to go back with people and buy time and buy what we need to buy. And, you know, in the short term, you know, if you have short-term needs that you think, you know, it might be fun to have sushi. That's something that, you know, can be arranged. We're not talking about, you know, huge clues here.
What did you guys find in the boat? Was there anything left?
I thought we went over
Yeah.
10 when we were on that.
I saw the list.
There was no knife. Oh, you mean in terms of the lab?
Yeah.
It has not, everything has not gone to, finished up at DNA yet. So it's possible that there were still, there were some areas that did test positive for blood, just when they do like they call it a presumptive test, when the people that were searching it. So those things went into the lab, and some of those things were like the screws from holding the carpeting in and that kind of thing. Those have not come back yet from DNA. The little, there were some little fragments that they thought might have been bone fragment, was not bone, did not test positive for bone. That one's come back.
Sand or something.
Yeah, they didn't, we didn't ask what it was, but it wasn't bone.
Right.
There's some hair that is not yours. But the way they figure out hair is...
I was mostly curious if they found any blood.
Yeah, there
I
was...
wasn't sure how long, because it's been sitting there in the rain for so long. I was curious if there was, I mean, I know there was when I parked it, but whatever.
Yeah, there was. We haven't heard anything back about it, and then they need something to compare it with.
Right.
So there's no knife?
No knife. There was no knife in the boat.
It may have been, I don't know what happened to that knife. It was a Tonto, cold steel Tonto.
How big? Like, was it
It had it was a 4.5 inch folding blade. And I think I bought it at Walmart in Port Angeles.
Do you remember what color any of it was?
It looks very similar to the one that I had on me when I was arrested. Just a different blade style, same company and everything, I think.
So if I'm correct about that, that was the murder weapon for one of the Washington murders.
Well, it was involved.
It was involved.
I think we talked about before when we were asking about federal jurisdiction about guns.
Yeah.
Were either of those victims shot?
No.
No. Strangled?
We'll get the whole story eventually.
Right, we're just to get parts so that we can move.
No, the only person I ever shot was Bill Courier.
Everybody else is strangled.
Yeah.
Or, I don't want to have the wrong impression, you know, so everybody else was strangled, or was there something else?
So one of the Washington things that was doesn't matter. It's just no, it wasn't strangled. I hit somebody in the head, so.
Did you mean to kill them or they died? or struggle and you hit them and they died, or did you mean to kill them that way?
No, I wasn't trying to kill him, I just, took him out of action.
I think we read that in one of those letters with the male, female couple.
Yeah. I saw it. I don't know. Rich mentioned that they gave you all that stuff. So, I should have asked them to give me copies so I know which ones you have.
We could go over that together and you could fill in the blanks at some point in time.
Well, we know in
I
Washington.
didn't realize they were allowed to take stuff out of my cell that I wasn't naming. That was pretty sick.
Well, we know from that there was a couple in Washington State, a male-female couple. We read that in the bill. Are those the same couple from that you took to the boat and dumped in the lake? Or were there others?
They went in that hole.
No, from,
Yeah. They were buried. Yeah, that was a while ago.
that was a long time ago. Right after the was that right after the military? You told us once right after the military, after you got out of the military.
It was before I got the boat.
And you had told us one time that, you know, it wasn't long when you got out of the military that you killed somebody, and it was that sort of feeling that you needed to do something that was hard to resist.
Yeah, maybe it was boring time.
Is it fair to say that we're looking at a lot more around the Washington area than not? Just the two in Washington?
No, there's a couple. There's a couple in Washington, and then the two related to the boat. Is that right?
Yeah.
So if we can't find this knife, I guess unfortunately that doesn't give us much to go on.
I know we had some knives, I don't know what all we had.
I think I got some from Kimberly's.
Is it possible it was at Kimberly's?
I don't think so. I haven't seen it for several years.
Could be in a different Washington cache.
No. No, I don't think we did. No, it's in Washington.
The Wyoming one you talked about?
No.
A couple of husband and wife, do you know?
I'm not gonna talk about that.
What about other caches? Another cache?
And that's one of our last long clips, but it plays into next week's clip, which is where I think the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office made both of their biggest mistakes related to this killer. And honestly, you're not going to believe what they missed.
Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LABROTTIECREATIONS.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, at BrodyCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more. You can come over to Patreon.com and check out what we've got going on there if you'd like to donate to fund future True Crime XS road trip investigations and FOIA requests. We'd also like to thank Anchor and Spotify for having the coolest all-in-one podcast platforms available. Definitely download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to start your own show today.
This is True Crime XS. In the books of Arthur Conan Doyle, Watson serves as Holmes' biographer. At the end of the first published Holmes story, A Study in Scarlet, Watson is so incensed by Scotland Yard's claiming full credit for its solution that he exclaims, "Your merits should be publicly recognized. You should publish an account of the case. If you want, I will for you." Holmes responds, "You may do what you like, Doctor." Therefore, the story is presented as a reprint from the reminiscences of John H. Watson, and most other stories of the series share this by implication. In the first chapter of The Sign of Four, Holmes comments on Watson's first effort as a biographer. "I glanced over it. Honestly, I cannot congratulate you upon it. Detection is, or ought to be, an exact science, and should be treated in the same cold and unemotional manner you have attempted to tinge it with romanticism. The only point in the case which deserved mention was the curious analytical reasoning from effects to causes, by which I succeeded in unraveling it." Whereupon Watson admits, "I was annoyed at this criticism of a work which has been specially designed to please him. I confess, too, that I was irritated by the egotism which seemed to demand that every line of my pamphlet should be devoted to his own special doings." In The Adventure of Silver Blaze, Holmes confesses, "I made a blunder, my dear Watson, which is, I am afraid, a more common occurrence than anyone would think who only knew me through your memoirs." And in The Hound of the Baskervilles, chapters 5 and 6, Holmes says, "Watson, Watson, if you are an honest man, you will record this also and set it against my successes." Whereas in his prologue to The Adventure of the Yellow Face, Watson himself remarked, "In publishing these short sketches of Holmes' cases, it is only natural that I should dwell rather upon his successes than upon his failures, on grounds that where Holmes failed, often nobody else succeeded." Sometimes Watson, and through him Conan Doyle, seems determined to stop publishing stories about Holmes. In The Adventure of the Second Stain, Watson declares that he had intended the previous story, The Adventure of the Abbey Grange, to be the last of these exploits of my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, which I should ever communicate to the public, but later decided that this long series of episodes should culminate in the most important international case which he has ever been called upon to handle, The Second Stain being that case. Despite this, it was succeeded by 20 other stories. In the later stories, written after Holmes's retirement, circa 1903 to 1904, Watson repeatedly refers to notes of many hundreds of cases to which I had never alluded, on grounds that after Holmes' retirement, the detective showed reluctance to the continued publication of his experiences. So long as he was in actual professional practice, the records of his successes were of some practical value to him. But since he is definitely retired, notoriety has become hateful to him. After Holmes' retirement, Watson often cites special permission from his friend for the publication of further stories, but received occasional unsolicited suggestions from Holmes of what stories to tell, as noted at the beginning in The Adventure of the Devil's Foot. In The Adventure of the Blanched Soldier, one of only 2 stories narrated by Holmes himself, the detective remarks about Watson, "I have often had occasion to point out to him how superficial are his accounts, and to accuse him of pandering to popular taste, instead of confining himself rigidly to facts and figures. But the narrative style seldom differs, and Holmes confesses that Watson would have been the better choice to write the story, noting when he starts writing that he quickly realizes the importance of presenting the tale in a manner that would interest the reader. In any case, Holmes regularly referred to Watson as my faithful friend and biographer, and once exclaims, "I am lost without my Boswell." At the beginning of The Adventure of the Veiled Lodger, Watson makes strong claims about the discretion and high sense of professional honor that govern his work as Holmes' biographer.